All right, so today we're going to dive into the story of one of the American Revolution's most, well, let's just say complicated heroes. I mean, you've definitely heard the name, right? Fort Sumter. It's the very spot where the Civil War kicked off. But the man behind that name, Thomas Sumter, well, he's a whole other story. A figure of both celebrated heroism and, as you'll see, some pretty intense controversy. He got this nickname, the Fighting Gamecock, because of his sheer tenacity. And he was, without a doubt, a hero to the Patriot cause. But his story, it is not that simple. And that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. Why is the legacy of this guy so fiercely debated?
Okay, first things first. To really get a handle on who this guy was, you have to understand the world he was thrown into. And let me tell you, it was an absolutely desperate situation.
So, picture this. It's the summer of 1780. The American Revolution in the South, it's basically on life support. This timeline here, it just paints this incredibly bleak picture. First, Charleston falls, and the entire Southern Continental Army surrenders. Then, Tarleton's massacre at Waxhaw's just stuns everybody. And to top it all off, a brand new American army gets absolutely crushed at Camden. I mean, the cause looked completely, totally lost. And right in the middle of all this chaos, there's Thomas Sumter. He's 44 years old, a retired officer, just living on his plantation. He'd actually left the military a couple of years earlier, probably thinking he was done with it all and could just live a quiet life. Yeah, that quiet life, it didn't last. When the infamous British commander, Banastre Tarleton, goes and burns his house down, everything changes. It becomes personal. This one act lit a fire under him, creating this burning desire for payback and reigniting his commitment to the American cause. As the historian put it, the lion was roused. All right, so you've got this newly roused lion. What's he gonna do? Well, he takes the fight directly to the British, launching this fierce, unpredictable partisan campaign. And look, Sumter wasn't about to sit around and wait for the Continental Army to regroup. Nope, he rallied the local militia himself, operating deep in the backcountry of South Carolina. His whole strategy was pretty straightforward. Hit him hard, hit him fast. Strike British outposts and supply lines exactly when and where they weren't expecting it. And his attack on the British post at Hanging Rock, wow, it was a stunning success. You have to remember, at this point, the Patriots desperately needed any kind of good news. Sumter didn't just give them good news, he gave them a major victory that sent morale soaring. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Look at the numbers here. These are the official British records of their own losses. Sumter's forces inflicted nearly 180 casualties on their professional loyalist units, and that's not even counting the militia. For a ragtag partisan force, this was a serious blow. And this quote right here from Sumter himself, it just brilliantly illustrates his perspective. He was proud of what they'd done, for sure, but also deeply frustrated. He felt like his militia's incredible accomplishments were being totally undervalued just because they weren't a part of the formal Continental Army. But here's the thing about Sumter. For every incredible high, there was often a devastating low. His aggressive, sometimes, let's be honest, reckless leadership could backfire. And just 12 days after that amazing victory at Hanging Rock, he gets caught completely by surprise by his old nemesis, Tarleton. The numbers here are, well, they're just brutal. Tarleton absolutely routed Sumter's forces at Fishing Creek. We're talking about Sumter himself barely escaping, having to ride into the woods half-dressed. His army was scattered. It was a huge, humiliating setback for the partisans. So you see the pattern, right? Sumter's military record was this total roller coaster of incredible highs and devastating lows. But it was his method for raising an army that would become his most controversial and, frankly, his most troubling legacy. Okay, so by 1781, Sumter's got a problem. He's struggling to get men to enlist for longer terms of service. So what does he do? He comes up with a plan that gets known as Sumter's Law, and it was a new and deeply disturbing form of payment. And this is where it gets really dark. The plan was essentially a slave bounty system. It offered black human beings, people seized from loyalist plantations, as property to white men who would enlist in his troops. It literally treated people as plunder, as a reward for service. And you have to understand, this isn't just us looking back with modern eyes and judging him. Make no mistake, this was controversial at the time. Other Patriot heroes, like the famous swamp fox Francis Marion, were absolutely appalled. Marion flat out refused to follow the law, calling it exactly what it was,
inhuman.
And that brings us right back to the central tension of Thomas Sumter's story, doesn't it? How do you weigh indispensable actions against ones that are, well, indefensible? His personality, it certainly didn't help things. The man was famously difficult to work with. He was insubordinate, his pride was immense, and he was just not built for cooperation with the Continental Army's leadership. In his mind, he was the sole commander in South Carolina. Period.
And you know what? After the war, he didn't just fade away into obscurity. Not at all. He had a long and very influential career in politics, serving in both the House and the Senate. And get this, he outlived every single one of his fellow revolutionary generals. So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway here? It's that without Sumter's fierce, unrelenting resistance during those really dark days of 1780, the British might very well have locked down the South for good. And that could have changed the entire outcome of the war. He was that important.
But his brutal methods, and especially his use of human beings as enlistment bounties, force us to confront a really tough question. How do we remember historical figures who were both indispensable to victory and, in some ways, indefensible in their actions? It's a question that echoes through how we look at history, and honestly, it's one we're still grappling with today.